Men communicate using human language. Human language is defined as a code, a conventional system of signs through which men can communicate and interact. Language is considered a personal factor that deeply characterizes the individual, as well as a social factor that is common to all members of society and enables people to take part in a social group. Language is a written and an oral form. In the past, written language enjoyed more prestige than the oral language because those who could read and write were at the top of the social scale. In addition, written language lasts over time, even longer than its author. Only written works could aspire to be considered masterpieces. On the other hand, oral language was considered a labile factor that could not be recorded by electronic devices as in modern times. This dichotomy has led essential consequences on language teaching methods. Learning a new language means learning how to read and write, whereas the oral aspect is often neglected or taken for granted. It is often considered as an obvious factor that should be already acquired. With the passing of centuries, more and more people learned how to read and write, and written language lost part of its prestige. Modern linguists prefer oral language that expresses the real essence of a language and the culture of people who speak that language. Spoken language is considered greater than written language for many reasons. On a biological level, all human beings are structured to speak, but not all men learn to write. On an historical level, speaking came before writing. We can learn to speak without any aid, but we cannot state the same about writing. In addition, the major linguistic mutations happen in the oral language at first, then they are included in the written language. Over the centuries, many methods and approaches sprang up to teach any language to non-native speakers. At the beginning, the teaching of foreign language was based on written language, grammar translation method, because it was considered more important than the oral one, as it has been said before. With the passing of time, teaching aimed more and more to make language learning useful to communicate in concrete situations. Starting from the basis of language teaching and analyzing it over the centuries, we can say that each time people elaborated a new method or approach, this was done with the best intentions, trying to do its best to give life to effective language teaching methods. Each time, people tried to give birth to a new method that was better than the previous one. However, not always the new methods were so effective as it was thought, so they were often replaced by others, considered more modern. Each theory was continually replaced by others. At the very beginning, the formal approach was considered the best and enjoyed much prestige. However, it was replaced by the direct approaches because people became more and more aware of the importance of oral language. Later, many linguists began to study language psychology. They added the affective and psychological dimension to language teaching. Each transition had the aim to improve even more language teaching in order to make it more complete possible. At the very beginning, we can state that the former method, grammar translation method, had its strong points as well as its weaknesses. This method neglected spoken language, stressing written and literary works. As a consequence, students were not able to speak the new language outside school. Later, direct approaches sprang up, and they stepped forward, comparing to the former method. They were based on the concept that living languages should be spoken, so they stressed oral activities such as dialogues, listening, and comprehension. Once again, these methods were not complete. They schematized the language, reducing it to few words and constructions, neglecting the abstract aspect of the language and the culture of the native speakers. The affective approaches enrich the language teaching with a psychological and introspective dimension, which is typical of human beings. Once more, these approaches were not comprehensive enough. They were focused on the student's psychology and feelings, neglecting the pragmatic aspect that should characterize language teaching. In conclusion, we can state that even if each method and approach is not complete in its entirety, we can manage to elaborate a perfect method by combining its strong points, a method that should be valid on all fronts. It should stress written language and translation, as well as spoken language and comprehension to improve oral skills. It should also take into consideration the student's psychological dimension to optimize his/her learning. Only using all these approaches